2 years ago, we did a pretty in-depth field day with a lot of CPG companies, kind of everybody throughout the whole supply chain. And the reason for that field day was just to showcase the rotation and um, really how I think like the rest of the supply chain should think about how they can help farmers in that process because I've used the term, I've heard it from a lot of different farmers, no market, no mission. So I really wanted to showcase how important it was that CPG companies and other actors in the supply chain really supported us in trying to create that rotation. um, I understood early on that if I wanted to farm regeneratively, and the whole operation, the whole idea is based off of having diversity. And when you're a farmer and you're going to the market, there isn't a whole lot of options for growing alternatives. It's pretty simplified. Corn, soybeans, wheat, that sort of thing. It's pretty hard to find these niche markets like winter greens or buckwheat or even sunflowers that are profitable. So I knew that I would have to make friends in the food industry and then try to bring them value somehow. Um, so that's a lot of what we've been working on. We're kind of turning the farm more into like an educational place for the supply chain to come and learn and understand better. Um, that I just think there's a lot of talk about regenerative ag, but there isn't much talk around how, I mean, most any farmer could grow these rotations, but the challenge lies in finding a market for them. So that's what we're working on the farm now, more so as the educational side. So we can go to the next slide. The picture on the left is of a Kernza field. That field was in Kernza for 4 years. Um, just a few more things about Kernza. It yields really well the first year and the second year, but after the third year, or during the third year, the yield drops off significantly, and there basically is no yield the third. There is no yield the third or fourth year. It's a great habitat for nesting birds, um, even for white-tailed deer, for mallard ducks. When you leave the farm alone for 4 years without any disturbance, it's really incredible the amount of wildlife that it brings in and the soil tilth afterwards. So those are all the good things, and I talked about kind of the bad things earlier, which is a serious problem. We talked about the perennial weeds that come in that perennial crop. Canadian thistle is probably the worst one, and it can set you back drastically as an organic farmer. So not only do you have 2 years of yield where you can be profitable, and then you have 2 years where you have to divide that crop into 3 or 4 years to actually get your revenue generated per acre. But then after that, you have a field of perennial weeds like thistle. So now you're going to have another 3 years of alfalfa to kind of mitigate and to push back the Canadian thistle. So, in my opinion, you have about 6 years invested in growing a 2 year cash crop. And if we can, does that video play?
Yeah.
Oh, so that's basically your cover crop. That mustard seed, or what is that? Yeah, that was somebody riding with me that didn't understand what was growing in my field. But that's what the fields look like in the springtime. So in that specific field, we had grown sunflowers, and then we underseeded the sunflowers with turnips, tillage radish, peas, sun hemp, and flax and buckwheat. And all of that grew very well during the year. What I do is I plant the sunflowers, I tine weed them or rotary hoe them, and then I cultivate them twice. And on the second pass of cultivation, I drop that seed mix. But I have to do it early enough because the sunflowers shade out pretty well. But if everything does get up and growing before it shades out, it survives. And then as the sunflowers die off, it keeps growing. And last year with all the rain, it grew like crazy. And it grew so well that it all went to seed, which it normally does a little bit. Last year it did really well and kind of replanted itself. Some of it overwintered. And then in the springtime, it looks like that last video that I showed you, which is great. And so there's a lot of biomass out there. There's no fall tillage. And I would consider it a full season cover crop that is being grown on those acres. And then I turn that under with that disc, call it green manure. And then that harrow flattens my field out, levels it off enough for me to go in there and plant soybeans. And that was that picture earlier with the soybeans and the nice soil tilth that was there. So all that happened in like a really, in about a month and a half, where we tilled the cover crop under, planted the beans, they were up and growing, and I got them cultivated. So there's just really short periods of open black dirt showing. All right, we can go to the next one. Buckwheat. I can just talk a little bit more about buckwheat. Buckwheat, it cycles phosphorus really well. And if you have ground that's kind of marginal or it's wet early in the spring, it's such a diverse crop that gives you so many options if you have it in the rotation. Say you planned on planting spring wheat organically and you get a terrible April and it just doesn't quit raining. It's probably not in your best interest once May comes to stick to your wheat plan. So like as a solid seeded crop, you can just switch from your wheat to buckwheat, let that farm dry out really well, wait till the second week in June or later if it doesn't dry out, and then plant buckwheat. And that's just like, these crops are just like tools in your toolbox that you can grab when you need them. Everything is so unpredictable right now, it seems like, with the spring, when spring comes. So the more options you have, I think just the better chance you have at success. So that's what I love about the buckwheat. Okay, we can go to the next one. Yeah. So maybe answer some questions or
Yeah,
I think
we'll go. I'm
questions
gonna
are
go
good.
look in the chat and see if we've got
I don't
any
see anything in the chat, but if you have a question, feel free to type it in or raise your hand.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to make sure all the participants can speak. So I think I have to actually click allow to talk for the participants. So if anybody has any questions, they can raise their hand or type it. If nobody has a question, I have a question while we're waiting for folks to respond. Luke, can you talk a little bit about marketing all of these crops? I mean, how does that work for you with so many different crops? Are you able to market them all? What is your strategy there?
Yeah. So that's kind of what I was saying earlier. Like early on, my strategy was I would just cold call and I would, physically show up at bakeries and breweries, and just start talking to different buyers. And that actually worked really well. I think showing up in person was probably the best thing that I did. And then just really focused on food grade varieties. There is such a difference in varieties. And there's differences in varieties, but there's also differences in each specific buyer and which varieties they want. So, just talk to as many different buyers as you can, and get on board with them as far as like sharing the risk and finding out what varieties work best for their specific product. That was a big one that, and it took a lot of years and we paid a lot of tuition doing that, but it really has transformed my farm is that one thing is just really communicating well with the buyers.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a question from Alania. Lonnie, you can unmute and ask your question.
Hey, I think this is Benjamin. I'm under.
Hi, Ben.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know why I did that, but I have the privilege of being able to talk to you a bunch, Luke, around your work. And one thing I still am very curious about, as you explained today, but as I know a little more detail, just like you've taken on the stewardship component in a very personal way. Your ethics, you kind of override I guess, the cost and input that some other farmers might take on just because it's the way you farm. And you've talked about having these like long crop rotations, and then you're multi-cropping, and that I'm just curious on how you specifically manage the harvest, and what are some of your techniques that you do? Like, say you have like 2 or 3 different crops growing. How are you able to harvest in a selective way and still get a premium crop with that? Like, what are some of the techniques you use?
Yeah. Well, mostly I plant one cash crop that's underseeded with cover crops. So not so much like harvesting 2 cash crops together, but there will be 4 to 5 different species growing in that field at a time. But there's kind of one big one is gluten-free. So a lot of smaller markets or food markets, I think gluten-free has grown, quite a bit in the last 10 years. Gluten-free is a crop where I have separate trucks, I have separate augers, I have separate holding bins, and they only get used for gluten-free products. So I never mix like my sunflowers or my buckwheat with any of that equipment. The combine, I can't have 2 of them. I probably wouldn't be a good idea to have 2 combines, but I do take a day and a half going through the combine and making sure that I have every last wheat kernel and every grain product out of that machine. So that's kind of the main one. But other than that, it has a lot to do with harvesting height. So like when I'm doing the sunflowers, that's why I love the sunflower so much, is because the head is so high and so easy to harvest while that cover crop is growing underneath. So that's like one example. With wheat, it's kind of the same thing, is the wheat gets up and growing really fast. Whereas like the legume that's growing underneath when they're planted at the same time, gets shaded out and it goes dormant and it stalls until the wheat dies off. There is a lot of risk in doing this, by the way. I mean, maybe not a lot, but there is definitely a risk in doing this. And an example is that wheat crop underseeded with the legume is they grew together, had a really wet spring, everything got started at the same time, and then just had a wet summer, and then the wheat started dying off and was ready to harvest, and then we had a really wet fall, and the legume just kept growing. And I lost, that farm of wheat that year because of wanting to grow that cover crop in companion with that cash crop. It got so green, and the red clover was waist high.
Damn.
And those things happen all the time. That was one reason I went to the annual mix for a while, where I would plant the wheat, work the wheat after it was harvested to set back the grass and the weeds, and then plant an annual mix. That was one reason I did that. Now I'm back to the red clover. And the reason I'm doing that is to maintain my nitrogen levels in my soil. So it's definitely a give and a take, and everything is like each crop and each strategy is kind of really specific.
And these are strategies you've created through your experience, correct?
Yeah, correct. And from networking or talking to other farmers and then
Yeah.
taking like two ideas from two different people, putting them together, but 100% just going out and doing it.
So
But
we should do a pamphlet of some kind that you can get all this down for farmers to check out, because I just think it's brilliant, like the different ways and the different nuances that you've done this. So, thanks again, Luke, for that. Really appreciate your work.
yeah, and just like I never want to be called an expert or anything because like this stuff is there's a reason why farmers went away from it. And it's because it's management intense. It takes a lot of different equipment. Um, and your efficiency definitely goes down. But where I am finding the efficiency is in the soil. The soil is becoming more efficient at growing a nutrient dense crop. So last couple of years we've been sending our crops off to be tested for nutrients, and the results are incredible. Like our buckwheat, for example, has 85% more antioxidants in it than the competitor of their choice that they could choose. So like the efficiency is showing up. A little bit of a ramble, a little bit off the subject, but if somebody does go down this path, you just have to keep in mind that there are externalities there that are going to be, on both sides. But anyway, yeah.
Thank you, Luke. You're awesome.
Thank you, Luke. We have a couple of more questions, Luke, if you're open. The first one is, are your markets mainly for organic label claims or regenerative organic certified?
Both. So it's all for sure organic certified. And like my yellow corn, I sold this year as ROC. My soybeans, they are organic. I haven't found an ROC market for that yet. My small grains, I started pretty small with like bakeries and breweries. They honestly don't care if they're even certified. They just have they want to know their farmer mentality. The buckwheat is ROC. Winter grains have been ROC. Kernza is ROC. The alfalfa gets fed to my own cattle, and the pasture is obviously just stays in place. So it's a mixture.
Okay.
But I do see demand coming on the ROC side. So
okay. The question was about seed. Maybe you could talk a little. I mean, that's you've got quite this. I can only imagine your organic certification inspection with all the different types of seed you have. So do you keep seed on hand for those last minute needed changes, or how do you source all this seed, and when do you start sourcing it so that you make sure you have it on hand, or do you keep your own?
both. And Glenn, that's a really good question. That was something I challenged. It was a challenge for a long time, is having the money that you needed up front to store a year's worth of seed and have it on hand, and then plant whatever the weather allowed for. So what I did is I bought $10,000 worth of these bulk seed totes that have hard containers and an easy slide on the bottom. I think they're called buck boxes or something. But I invested in those and I paid for them in 1 year because it kept the mice and the rodents out of them, which was always a disaster with totes or paper bags. But that's the road I had to take because my plans would change all the time. Cover crops needed to be planted earlier than I anticipated. So like if I was waiting to order them and get them when I needed them, I never had them on time, and my cash crop grew too tall too fast. So I do my best planning. Like in January, I have all the seed ordered up and I have it sitting in the shed, and then we go from there. But that's a really good question.
Okay. The next one is, do you feel the longer crop rotation is better overall for soil and being overall profitable, or would a simplified yet diverse rotation work better? Ultimately, we do need to make it work financially.
That's a very logical question. There's there's no question that if I had a corn, soybean, wheat, alfalfa rotation, I would be more profitable. Um, so it's as simple as that. There's a lot of crops on my farm that I can't insure as well, which adds to the risk. Like buckwheat, sunflowers, Kernza, pasture, um, you know, sometimes winter grains. And they usually aren't really excited about me companion cropping with my cash crops that I can insure. So I think insurance is like a big part of that question as well, as far as making it work financially. That's a major issue, is having a diverse rotation that's not insurable. It's very, very risky. Longer rotations is better. It's definitely better for soil, but not always better for profitability.
Mhm. That's a good point. We had one other question about your testing. Could you talk a little bit more about the different types of testing that you do and who does your testing, both on the crop and soil?
Yeah. So I work with an organization called Merge Impact, and um, they do soil tests, they do ecosystem service. What am I trying to say? So they test everything from like the bugs on the land to the birds that are using it, to like nesting habitat. Um, and along with that, we sent in each crop to Cornell University. And then Cornell did um, multiple tests on each crop and then analyzed that data next to um, another grain or product, the same varieties off the shelf that would compare to mine, and the results are really good in my favor. But I didn't pick the competitors; Cornell University did.
Yep. Yeah, so that's exciting that you're doing the type of testing that's actually showing the benefits to the soil and the benefits to the plant, and then ultimately to the food that the people are consuming. It's just healthier all the way
Mhm.
around.
And it makes sense. I mean, if you look at the diversity in these fields year after year, and the minimal disturbance and the livestock integration and doing all the right things, um, it it should be better. So
So, look, do you bring any, or maybe you could talk about what inputs, if any, do you bring on your farm? I mean, what, other than buying seed, what other things? It doesn't sound like
well,
you're buying in fertilizer or anything, but
kind of back to the financial piece, to make it work. Corn is kind of is a cash cow. It makes good money. Um, and before I plant corn, I have to bring in hog manure for fertility, just because corn is so nitrogen intense. So I do for corn, and then I'll top dress alfalfa because I need to replace the potassium and phosphorus. So those two crops do get supplemented with off farm fertility, just because, well, for a lot of reasons, just because I need to replace what I'm taking. So
okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from any other participants? If so, you can unmute or you can drop it in the chat and raise your hand too. Okay, another question for Luke. Luke, if you could do one thing different, what would you do different as you're planning this all out the last 5 years?
yeah, the one thing I would do different is I wouldn't go all in. I went all in, and I think it maybe set me back a little bit. Um, Mostly weather events. It wasn't like a lack of management or anything that set me back. Usually when I did something risky, and I would sleep on the tractor floor and live in the field practically to make sure I got my work done on time. But taking things like at 5 acres at a time, doing a new experiment 5 acres at a time, and not 100 acres at a time. Seed is expensive, machinery is expensive, fuel is expensive, land is expensive. And the last 5 years, things have gone up even more. Anybody that's farming understands that. But just taking small bites, there's no reason to go all in. It's kind of irresponsible. So just one small piece at a time.
Since I see no more questions yet, I have another one for you. What do your neighbors think about this?
I have neighbors that they will sit on the end of the field and just watch me farm, I guess. I have 3, 4 pickups that'll sit windows lined up, just watching me farm. In the beginning, I was told that it was not a good idea, and you like a lot of serious comments about you should not go down this path. And at the time, I was kind of confused and a little bit of kind of a bullish bullhead attitude where I was like, nah, I'm going to do this no matter what. You guys you don't know what you're talking about kind of attitude. And then looking back, I think that like my neighbors were really saying like, you're young, you really don't understand agriculture, you don't know the kind of risks that are involved, and there's a lot of unforeseen things that are going to happen. And I think what they were saying is like, hey man, there's a reason why farmers don't do this. Um, I think a lot of it is a lot of farmers don't go down this path because there just simply isn't markets and there's like no safety net for it. So I don't blame them for telling me that. If somebody came to me now and said, what should I do and how do I go about doing this? I want to do this. I would just say do 5 acres at a time or start really small and then ease your way into it. But my neighbors are supportive. I think I have gained a lot of respect as for organic or regenerative farming in the area because we do it justice. We do get good yields when we do grow a cash crop. As far as I'm concerned, I think my fields are very clean. The only thing I can't control are the perennial weeds like Canadian thistle. And not that I'm not saying I like can't control them because I do with my rotation. It's just that there are years that they come on and I didn't expect it. And there's nothing anybody can do about that. So, but I have gained a lot of respect.
Good. Can you talk a little bit about your land management strategy, your combination between, or maybe you already did this and I didn't hear it in the beginning, between owning and leasing, and what are the risks with that, doing it this way on leased land?
Yeah, a lot of risks on leased land. So I don't own any land. All my acres are rented. We started farming, we were pulling equipment out of groves and old machine sheds. And so I don't come from from like a 3rd generation farm. That's what I'm saying. But that kind of carries over to the risk. We lease everything. Landowners, you really have to find somebody that really understands what it is you're trying to do. And it's not that you're gonna get a screaming deal from them or anything on cash rent. It's just that you know that they won't get worried if you have a hiccup or something goes wrong and it doesn't look perfect. Or ones that aren't scared of maybe a little dirtier field than the neighbor's conventional field. That's kind of the main thing. Just having a good landowner that's understanding and doesn't get real excited and just has an overall understanding of regenerative ag. But I've lost land, 2 years in when the next contract was going to come up and it was supposed to be certified organic. So you just kind of eat it and you move on. There's really no other option. But it is something you really need to have a conversation with your landowners. Never ever assume that they understand what you're doing. Make sure that they understand.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So who are your partners in this, Luke? Do you have anybody helping you?
Yeah, like I think early on, my early mentor was Carmen Fernals. He taught me a lot of like the agronomics and like the strategy behind when to plant, crop rotations, things like that. Um, but right now it's me and my family. Um, and then we have a lot of good partners. We have good buyers that have worked with us for a long time, and we've worked with them too. Um, yeah, and I think we're starting to kind of work with the ROA a little bit on things. But yeah, lot of there. I got good landowners. I got good buyers, um, and a good family to help me. So
Great. Well, we're just about up on time, but I thought maybe in our closing time here, can you talk a little bit about, I'm curious why you decided to go with regenerative organic certified rather than just staying organic certified?
yeah, and I'll give you my honest reason why. I when I was farming conventionally, I had plenty of time, and I sold seed for the big seed companies like DeKalb and Syngenta. And then when I seen that business model, it really turned me off, and it really like showed me if you're never going to be big enough, is what it showed me. And that transitioned me into organic. And once I was organic, I really started seeing that there's a lot of correlation between what was going on in the organic world and the way, basically the way farmers were valued. So then I realized, well, I'm going to need to transition to regenerative and hopefully find a marketplace that will value these extra practices that we're doing, because like Steve said earlier, like at the end of the day, financially, we have to swing it. Otherwise, we're not going to be here. So that was my game plan, is I was hoping that I would find a new group of people and we would play our own game.
Thank you. Well, if we don't have any other questions for Luke, Luke, I understand you do field days from time to time. I've been to one at your place in 2023 and one in 2024, kind of some gatherings. Are you planning to have any in the future that we might be able to be looking out for?
Yeah, I'm still kind of just wait. Yeah, I think we're going to be planning one maybe in September with the ROA.
Okay.
So we're still waiting on dates for that one.
Yeah, Ben's on the call, so he'll be working on that. So those who are interested, if I'll be sending out some information when Luke is having his field day. He's a Regenerative Organic Learning Center with the Regenerative Organic Alliance. I've been out to his farm a couple times and thoroughly enjoyed it. Learned a lot, Luke. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for caring for the land. Thank you for taking your organic, ethical mindset to a whole nother level. You are a great example to farmers everywhere. And I commend you for everything that you're doing, and knowing that you've got a rah-rah crowd behind you all over the Midwest and the United States that's cheering you on from afar for everything that you're doing. I know it's difficult as a farmer myself. I know the challenges that you're experiencing going through this, but you are paving the way, and you are a role model for so many other farmers who are trying to do this. So thank you for your time today, and I look forward to future collaborations. And well, thank you everybody who joined us today, and this webinar will be recorded and posted up on our YouTube page in a few days. Thank you, Luke, and thank you everyone for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks everybody for that came on. I appreciate it.
You're amazing, Luke. Thank you.
Thank you guys.